One day, it started to rain. Nothing unusual, just an ordinary day. People stayed inside, looking out the window, passing the time quietly. The sound of rain felt familiar. The scene outside felt normal. But what fell that day was not the rain people believed it to be. It was not water. It was something you could pick up with your hands, a jelly-like substance. It landed on cars. It stuck to windows. People could touch it. And then something strange happened. The people who touched it started getting sick. This was not a normal weather event. This was the beginning of something unexplained. In August 1994, in Oakville, Washington, a small rural town surrounded by forests and farmland, nothing unusual ever happened. There were no major incidents, no headlines, no reason to worry. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Life followed a simple rhythm. In the morning, people worked their land. In the afternoon, they took care of their homes. In the evening, they spent time with their families. That day was no different. The sky was gray. Rain was falling steadily. People stayed inside, going about their usual routines. Outside, a quiet rain continued. No one thought anything was strange. It was just a slightly wetter day, nothing more. But slowly, that ordinary day began to change. That afternoon, one resident stepped outside. He walked toward his car. And then he noticed something. On the windshield, there was a clear substance. At first, it looked like clumped rain, but something felt off. When he looked closer, it was completely different. Rain should move. It should slide down. But this held its shape. He reached out and touched it. It was cold. It compressed under his finger, but it did not break. When he pulled his hand away, it slowly returned to its original form. That was when he felt something was wrong. He turned on the wipers, and in that moment, something impossible happened. The substance did not wipe away. Instead, it stretched. Long, thin strands pulled across the glass. Then it gathered itself back together, sticky, slow, almost like it was alive. He stood there, watching it, for a long moment, and then he understood. This was not rain. After that day, similar stories began to spread throughout the town. Some people found it on their windows. Others saw it on the grass. Some picked it up with their hands. It always looked the same, clear, jelly-like. And when touched, it had a strange elasticity. One resident described it like this. It was not solid. It was not liquid. It was something in between. Children touched it out of curiosity. Adults laughed it off at first. Just strange rain. Nothing more. But then something became clear. It did not happen once. It kept happening. Every few days, the same substance fell again. Same area, same texture, same appearance. It was repeating. At that point, it was no longer coincidence. People began to feel uneasy. This was not rain. This was something falling from the sky. As time passed, people who had touched the substance began to speak. They described it in similar ways. It felt cold, soft. It moved like gelatin, but it was not water. One person said they tried to wipe it off with a tissue, but it did not fully come off. Even after it disappeared, something felt wrong. A faint residue, as if something remained. A strange stickiness that did not go away. Another person said they washed their hands repeatedly, but the sensation lingered. It felt as if something was still there, on their skin, something invisible. This was not a simple substance. And then, days later, the people who had touched it began to experience the same symptoms. The strange part was not the substance. It was the people. Those who had touched it were the first to change. At first, it felt like a mild illness, a sore throat, a cough, a heavy feeling in the body, nothing alarming. But as time passed, the symptoms grew worse: high fever, persistent coughing, shortness of breath. The body did not recover easily, and then extreme fatigue. It continued without relief. Sunny Barclift. She was one of the people who had seen the substance. She later said that after it fell, her condition suddenly worsened. At first, she thought it was just a cold, but the symptoms spread unusually fast, and she was not alone. Same area, same time, same symptoms. This was not an individual case. This was something affecting the entire town at once. The phenomenon was not limited to people. Pets began getting sick as well. Cats, dogs, animals inside homes showed the same symptoms. They became weak. Their movement slowed. Their breathing became unstable. They stopped eating. They remained still. At first, it seemed like they were simply unwell, but then something far worse happened. Across the town, cats began to die. Not one, not two, many. They showed similar symptoms, then collapsed within a short period of time. Even healthy cats suddenly died without warning. That was when people realized something. This was not normal. Humans and animals getting sick together, and the animals dying first. That could not be explained as a seasonal illness. If it were something in the air, perhaps it could be possible. But by then, the residents already knew one thing. Those who became sick were the ones who had seen it or touched it. This was not coincidence. Eventually, some residents decided to collect the substance. They gathered the material that had fallen like rain. They placed it into glass jars and plastic containers. They knew this was not something they could ignore. The samples were sent for testing. At first, people assumed it was environmental contamination, something from a factory, something from pollution, nothing more. But the results pointed in a completely different direction. The test results were unexpected. Inside the substance, cellular structures were found. This was not inorganic material, it was organic. And then, an even more disturbing discovery. Actual bacteria were identified: Pseudomonas fluorescens, Enterobacter cloacae. These are not substances that appear in normal rain. They are commonly found in the human digestive system or in clinical environments, which meant this was not naturally formed rain. And there was more. Under microscopic analysis, structures resembling white blood cells were observed. White blood cells. They are part of a living organism. They do not form naturally in the open environment. This was not rain. This may have been biological material, something that came from somewhere. At that moment, people began asking a different question. What exactly fell from the sky? The story began to spread. Local media picked it up. Jelly-like rain, unknown substance, people getting sick. Public attention grew rapidly, but there was no official explanation. Some authorities suggested it might be a natural phenomenon, but no clear conclusion was ever given. And over time, the case began to fade. Quietly. But the unanswered questions remained. What made this case even more disturbing was not just that it was unexplained, it was that the evidence disappeared. Some of the collected samples were sent to laboratories. They were stored for further analysis. But during that process, something strange happened. Some samples went missing during transport. There was no clear record of where or how they disappeared. The documentation was incomplete, unusually incomplete. And then another incident occurred. One of the laboratories handling the samples caught fire. The cause was never determined, but in that fire, stored data and samples were lost. Completely. Was it an accident, or was something meant to disappear? The timing was too precise to ignore. It felt as if something had to be erased. And whatever it was, we were never meant to see it. There were many attempts to explain what happened. The first theory was a military experiment. At that time, there were suspicions of aerial testing in the northwestern United States. Microorganisms, biological agents, weather-related experiments. Some residents said they saw an aircraft flying overhead that day, and soon after, the substance began to fall. If that were true, this would not be natural. It would be intentional release, but there was no official evidence to confirm it. So other explanations were suggested. A natural phenomenon, organic material from the ocean carried into the air by atmospheric changes, lifted by pressure systems, then falling with the rain. In theory, it is possible, but at some point, it stopped sounding like an explanation and started sounding like a guess. This explanation raises another problem: the nature of the substance, its structure, its consistency, the way it held shape, the way it degraded over time, and the symptoms that appeared in both humans and animals. This does not easily fit a natural model. At that point, some began to question the explanations themselves. Perhaps these were not answers. Perhaps they were attempts to force meaning onto something unknown. And then there was another theory, one that sounded almost impossible. At the time, there were reports of unusual activity near the coast, a military exercise, large groups of jellyfish being destroyed during testing. Some claimed that fragments were launched into the air, carried upward into the clouds, and eventually falling back down with the rain. It sounds unlikely, but this theory gained attention for one reason. The characteristics matched: the texture, the organic structure, the way it broke down over time. All of it resembled biological remains. If that were true, then what fell that day was not rain. It may have been fragments of something else. After everything that happened, no one could prove what it was. After that event, no identical phenomenon was officially reported in Oakville again. Officially. In the end, there was no conclusion. The substance disappeared over time. It degraded. It left fewer traces. And eventually, there was nothing left to analyze. The case faded away, but it was never resolved. It remains an unexplained event. And one fact still stands. The material was not inorganic. It contained bacteria, cellular structures, even traces resembling white blood cells. And yet, no one could explain it. This was not rain. This may have been biological material, something that came from somewhere, something that once belonged to a living system, and somehow it fell from the sky. What fell that day was not the rain people believed it to be, and even now no one knows what it truly was. But a more important question remains. Even today, we still walk in the rain, without hesitation, without doubt. We believe it is only water. But what if something else is mixed within it? Would we recognize it? Or would we simply let it pass just like that day? because that was not rain. It was something we believed was rain. If this story left you wondering, the next one is waiting for you. Subscribe and stay with us.